Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you love and seen a complete stranger? Not a stranger you've just met, but a stranger who has been wearing a familiar face for years, sleeping in your son's bed, sitting at your dinner table, calling you mom. For Eleanor Vance, that moment didn't happen with a thunderclap or a dramatic revelation. Make sure you watch till the very end, it gets worse before it gets better. And I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unbelievable stories. It arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening, nestled between the clinking of forks and a polite request to pass the salt. Her daughter-in-law, Chloe, smiled at her, a perfect, brilliant smile that had always warmed the room, but tonight, it felt like a draft. "Eleanor, you're looking a little tired," Chloe said, her voice a silken ribbon of concern. "Are you remembering to take your supplements? Liam and I worry." Liam, her son, nodded in agreement, his brow furrowed with the earnest, gentle worry he'd inherited from his late father. It was a picture of familial devotion. But as Chloe's eyes met hers, Eleanor saw something else flicker behind the manufactured warmth. A flash of cold, hard assessment. It was the look of a jeweler appraising a stone, not a daughter checking on her mother. And in that split second, 100 little off-key notes from the past few years suddenly composed a chilling symphony in her mind. The question wasn't what had happened. The question was what it had cost. And the answer would unravel not just a family, but the very meaning of love and loyalty. It began, as most tragedies do, with something small. A week after that unsettling dinner, Eleanor was looking for her late husband's wristwatch, the one he'd received for his 25th anniversary at the firm. It wasn't flashy, a simple leather-banded timepiece, but its sentimental value was immeasurable. It was the last thing he'd worn. She kept it in a velvet-lined box on her dresser. Now, the box was empty. She searched her bedroom methodically, her heart starting to beat a little faster, a frantic bird against her ribs. She checked drawers, the closet, under the bed. Nothing. When Liam and Chloe came over for their Sunday visit, she mentioned it, her voice trembling slightly. Chloe immediately rushed to her side, her face a mask of empathy. "Oh, Eleanor, are you sure? Where did you last see it?" she asked, already starting to recheck the very places Eleanor had just searched. "Maybe it just got misplaced. You know how things can sometimes walk off." Liam patted her shoulder. "Don't worry, Mom. It'll turn up. You were probably just cleaning and put it somewhere safe. So safe you forgot where it was." They both laughed, a soft, indulgent sound that was meant to be comforting but instead felt like a pat on the head to a child. A week later, it was a pair of sapphire earrings, a gift from her own mother. Chloe's response was the same. Sympathy, gentle suggestions of forgetfulness, and a promise to help her have a good look around. The gaslighting was so subtle, so cloaked in love, that Eleanor almost believed it. She started to question herself. Was she becoming forgetful? Was this what aging felt like? A slow, creeping erosion of her own mind, leaving her adrift in a sea of confusion? But late at night, when the house was silent and the ghosts of her memories were their most vivid, she would sit in her husband's old armchair and know, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was not losing her mind. She was being robbed. And the thief was smiling at her from across the dinner table. The campaign of gentle erosion continued, a slow, patient chipping away at Eleanor's confidence. Chloe was a master of the craft, her every action a perfectly calibrated blend of affection and subtle condescension. She would help Eleanor organize her closets, and afterward, a sentimental porcelain bird would be missing from the mantelpiece. When Eleanor would notice its absence days later, Chloe would tilt her head with that look of profound pity. "Oh, sweetie, are you sure it was there? I remember us talking about how cluttered that shelf was getting. Maybe we packed it away in one of the boxes for storage?" There were no boxes for storage. But when Liam would ask, Chloe would sigh softly, "Your mother is getting a bit overwhelmed. I'm just trying to make things easier for her." The narrative was set: Eleanor was the fragile, aging matriarch, and Chloe was the selfless, devoted caretaker. Liam, caught in the middle and blinded by his love for his vibrant, capable wife, became Chloe's most effective tool. He saw his mother's distress as a symptom of her grief and loneliness, not as a valid response to a real threat. "Mom, Chloe loves you," he'd say gently over the phone. "She spends so much time trying to help you. Maybe you could try to appreciate it a little more? She told me you seemed upset with her the other day." Eleanor would fall silent, the words caught in her throat. How could she explain that the very help he was praising felt like a violation? How could she describe the cold dread that washed over her whenever Chloe's manicured hand rested on her arm? To voice these feelings would make her sound ungrateful, even paranoid. It was a perfect trap. One afternoon, Chloe insisted on cooking a large batch of stew for Eleanor to freeze for the week. She bustled around the kitchen, a whirlwind of domestic efficiency, humming a cheerful tune. "This will save you so much trouble, Eleanor. No need for you to be standing over a hot stove." Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, feeling like a guest in her own home. While Chloe was rummaging in the pantry for spices, Eleanor noticed her own purse, which she'd left on the counter, was slightly ajar. A cold knot formed in her stomach. She never left her purse open. She waited until Chloe was absorbed in stirring the pot, then quietly walked over and looked inside. The $50 bill she'd withdrawn from the bank that morning was gone. Her breath hitched. It was such a small amount, easily explained away. She could have sworn she'd spent it. She might have dropped it. But she knew. She knew she hadn't. Later that evening, as Chloe and Liam were leaving, Chloe hugged her tightly. "You take care of yourself, Mom," she whispered, her voice warm against Eleanor's ear. "Don't worry about a thing. We're here for you." As they walked out the door, Chloe turned back to say something to Liam, and the light from the porch caught the edge of a crisp bill peeking out from the pocket of Chloe's jacket. It was folded exactly the way Eleanor always folded her cash. It was the quietest scream Eleanor had ever uttered, a silent, internal shriek of confirmation. The thief wasn't just taking her things, she was taking her sanity, piece by piece, and making her a willing accomplice in her own demise. Feeling utterly alone and increasingly desperate, Eleanor knew she couldn't rely on anyone else's perception of the truth. She had to create her own record, a bulwark against the rising tide of gaslighting that threatened to consume her. She bought a simple, lockable diary, the kind a teenager might use, and hid it beneath a loose floorboard in her closet, a secret she hadn't kept since she was a girl. Inside its pages, she began to build her case. Her entries were not emotional tirades, they were meticulous, almost clinical. October 14th, Chloe came over to help with the laundry. "Noticed later that the silver locket from Aunt Carol is missing from my jewelry box. When I asked, she said she hadn't seen it, but that the clasp had been loose for weeks. Suggested I probably lost it while I was out." October 22nd, Liam gave me $100 cash for my birthday. I put it in the top drawer of my nightstand. Chloe brought me flowers in the afternoon. The money was gone that evening. She said I should be more careful, that I might have a problem with memory slips. She documented every missing object, every subtly cutting remark, every instance where Chloe's story shifted. The journal became her anchor in reality. Reading her own neat, steady handwriting was a confirmation that she was not insane. These things had happened. This was real. The act of writing it down was an act of defiance. One Saturday, Liam came over alone to fix a leaky faucet under the sink. While he worked, Eleanor was in the garden. He finished sooner than expected and went looking for her, calling her name. Hearing no answer, he went to her bedroom, thinking she might be resting. He noticed a scuff mark on the floor near her closet, and curiosity piqued, he saw the edge of the loose floorboard. Thinking it was damage he needed to fix, he pried it up. And there he found the diary. He knew he shouldn't. It was an invasion of her privacy, but his worry, so carefully stoked by Chloe, got the better of him. He thought he would find ramblings, confused thoughts, evidence of his mother's deteriorating mind. He opened it. He read entry after entry, his heart sinking with each line. It wasn't the diary of a confused old woman. It was a logbook of accusations, all pointed squarely at his wife. He felt a wave of anger and deep, profound sadness. He didn't see a thief, he saw his mother, lost in paranoia, creating a villain where there was only a loving daughter-in-law. Later that week, Chloe found the diary while looking for a misplaced blanket. Her performance was worthy of an Oscar. She brought it to Liam, her eyes wide with a carefully crafted, heartbreaking sorrow. "Liam. I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I found this. She thinks I'm a monster." She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "All I've ever wanted was for her to love me. I try so hard. Maybe I'm trying too hard. Maybe I should just stay away." It was a masterful stroke. She had transformed Eleanor's defense into an attack, and herself from perpetrator to victim. That night, Liam went to see his mother. He was gentle, but his disappointment was a heavy cloak in the small room. He held the diary in his hands. "Mom," he began, his voice strained. "We need to talk about this. This isn't healthy. You're building these elaborate fantasies. Chloe is heartbroken. She loves you. Why would you write these horrible things about her?" Eleanor looked at the diary in his hands, her one fortress, now being used as a weapon against her. She looked at her son's pained, earnest face, and saw not her ally, but her judge. The trap had closed. She was now not only old and forgetful, but cruel and delusional. She had never felt more alone in her life. Liam's belief in his wife was a fortress, built on years of shared laughter, quiet moments, and a future they were planning together. His mother's accusations, recorded in that sad, secret diary, were like stones thrown against granite walls. They made a sound, but they left no mark. Yet, even the strongest walls can develop cracks. The first one was almost invisible. A few weeks after the diary incident, Liam and Chloe were at a charity gala. Chloe looked stunning in a new emerald green dress. As she raised her arm to wave to a friend, a gold bracelet with a unique, twisted design caught the light. Liam's breath caught for a second. He'd seen that bracelet before. It was one of his mother's, a custom piece his father had commissioned for her 30th anniversary. He was certain of it. "That's a beautiful bracelet, honey," he said, keeping his voice casual. "Is it new?" Chloe glanced down at her wrist, her smile not faltering for a second. "Oh, this old thing," she said with a light laugh. "I found it at a vintage shop last month. Isn't it a lucky find?" The explanation was plausible. It was a vintage piece, after all. But his father had told him the jeweler had promised it would be a one-of-a-kind design. He pushed the thought away. It was a coincidence. It had to be. Another crack appeared a month later. Liam was working from home and overheard Chloe on the phone in the other room. Her voice was different from the warm, bubbly tone she usually used. It was sharp, clipped, and cold. "The payment was sent." "Check again," she said, her voice low. "No, that's all you're getting for now. Don't call me here again. I'll handle it." When she came out of the room and saw him, she flinched, just for a moment, before her placid smile returned. "Just a difficult client," she explained, waving a dismissive hand. "You know how it is." He nodded, but the dissonance unsettled him. The woman on that phone call was not the woman he thought he knew. The most significant crack, however, came from a piece of mail. A credit card statement for an account Chloe had opened, one he'd forgotten about. He usually let her handle the bills, trusting her completely. But this time, for a reason he couldn't articulate, he opened it. He scanned the charges: a spa day for $200, multiple purchases from high-end online boutiques, and a single, startling charge for $3,000 from a place called Luxury Auto Detailing. He frowned. They hadn't gotten their car detailed. He asked her about it that evening, trying to sound nonchalant. "Hey, I saw a big charge on the visa for a car detailer. Did you get the sedan done?" Chloe, who was reading a book, looked up without any sign of alarm. "Oh, that. No, that was for my dad's birthday. I paid to have his classic car fully restored." He was so thrilled. It was a perfect answer. Generous, thoughtful, and completely in character for the loving daughter she portrayed herself to be. Liam even felt a pang of guilt for his suspicion. But later that night, as he lay in bed, he remembered something. Chloe's father's birthday wasn't for another 4 months. It was a small, insignificant detail. A tiny thread pulled from a grand tapestry. But for the first time, Liam found himself looking at the thread and wondering, with a cold, sickening dread, what would happen if he kept pulling. He looked at his sleeping wife, her face peaceful and innocent in the moonlight, and felt a chasm open between them. For the first time, he saw the stranger that his mother had seen. The small, nagging inconsistencies began to coalesce into a pattern of deliberate deception, and Liam's unease curdled into a cold, hard suspicion. He started paying attention to the one thing that never lies: the money. His mother, Eleanor, had always been financially comfortable, a result of her late husband's prudent planning. After his death, Chloe had graciously offered to help Eleanor manage her finances, moving her to online banking and setting up automatic bill payments to simplify her life. At the time, Liam had seen it as a blessing, another example of his wife's boundless generosity. Now, he saw it as an opportunity. Eleanor, emboldened by the fact that someone might finally be listening, admitted her own fears. "Liam, I know I'm not as sharp as I used to be," she'd said, her voice barely a whisper, "but the numbers don't feel right. My savings account, it seems to be shrinking faster than it should." Under the pretense of helping his mother create a new budget, Liam asked for her online banking credentials. Chloe, ever helpful, provided them immediately. "It's a great idea," she'd chirped. "I've tried to get her to track her spending, but she finds it all so confusing. Maybe she'll listen to you." That night, Liam sat at his desk, the glow of the monitor casting long shadows on the wall. He logged into his mother's account. At first glance, everything looked normal. Mortgage payments, utilities, groceries. But then he started digging into the transaction history. He found small, recurring monthly payments he didn't recognize. A $49.99 subscription to a lifestyle design service. A $75 monthly charge to a company called Artisan Curators. He Googled them. Both were high-end subscription boxes for luxury goods and fashion. Then he saw the e-transfers. Small amounts at first, $100 here, $200 there, sent to a name he didn't recognize. Over the past year, the amounts had grown larger and more frequent. He pulled up his and Chloe's joint account on a split screen. His blood ran cold. He could see corresponding deposits into their account on the same days, for the same amounts, often labeled consulting fee or client payment. Chloe ran a small interior design business from home. The labels were plausible enough to deflect any casual scrutiny. But the timing was undeniable. She was siphoning money from his mother's account and laundering it through her business. The scale of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a few $100s. It was thousands. Tens of thousands. The missing jewelry, the lost cash, that was just petty theft. This was a systematic, calculated draining of his mother's life savings. He felt a wave of nausea. He thought of all the times he had dismissed his mother's concerns, all the times he had told her she was confused, all the times he had taken Chloe's side. He hadn't just been a bystander, he had been an accomplice. He had held his mother down while his wife robbed her blind. The image was so violent, so horrific, it made him gasp for air. He stared at the screen, at the cold, hard numbers that spelled out a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical blow. The fortress of his belief had not just been cracked, it had been leveled. And standing in the rubble was the sickening realization that his mother had been right all along. The stranger was real. And she was sleeping in his bed. The grief came first, a suffocating wave of it. Grief for the marriage he thought he had, for the woman he thought he'd married, and for the trust he had so carelessly broken with his own mother. Then came the anger. It was a cold, quiet rage, a stark contrast to the hot, explosive temper of his youth. This was a patient anger, a methodical fury. He knew a confrontation without irrefutable proof would be useless. Chloe was a master manipulator. She could twist words, feign tears, and turn any accusation back on him. She would call him paranoid, just as she had his mother. No, he needed something she couldn't talk her way out of. He needed to catch her in the act. His guilt was a heavy stone in his gut. He had to protect his mother now, but the only way to do it felt like a profound betrayal of his own vows. He went online and purchased a small, high-definition nanny cam, the kind that looks like a USB phone charger. When it arrived, he went to his mother's house alone, telling her he needed to install a new software update on her computer. Eleanor watched him, her eyes filled with a quiet, weary sadness. She didn't ask questions. She seemed to have resigned herself to a world that no longer made sense. While the fake update bar slowly progressed on the screen, Liam went into the living room. His hands trembled as he plugged the camera into a wall outlet directly across from the antique secretary desk where his mother kept her checkbook and the few valuable pieces of jewelry she had left. The camera's wide-angle lens captured the desk, the chair, and the doorway to the hall. It was a perfect, silent witness. He said nothing to Eleanor about it. He couldn't bear to give her a hope that might be dashed, nor could he bring himself to confess the true depth of his earlier blindness. For now, this was his secret, his penance. He connected the camera to his phone, and the waiting began. For 3 days, nothing happened. He watched the live feed obsessively, his phone a constant source of anxiety. He saw his mother move through her quiet routines, reading in her chair, watering her plants, staring out the window. The sight of her quiet loneliness was a knife in his heart. He had let this happen. He had left her to face this predator alone. Then, on the 4th day, he got a motion alert on his phone. He was in a meeting at work, but his heart hammered against his ribs. He excused himself and rushed to the restroom, locking the stall door behind him. He opened the app. The live feed showed Chloe, letting herself in the front door with the key he'd given her. She called out, "Eleanor? You home?" Silence. Liam knew his mother was at her weekly bridge game. He watched, his breath held, as Chloe's entire demeanor shifted. The warm, sunny mask dissolved, replaced by a look of impatient, cold efficiency. She walked directly to the secretary desk. He watched as she pulled on a pair of thin latex gloves from her purse, a detail so chillingly premeditated it made him feel sick. She didn't rifle through the drawers, she knew exactly where to look. She opened the bottom right drawer and removed an old leather-bound checkbook. She flipped through it, then tore out 3 checks from the back. She then opened the small, carved wooden box where Eleanor kept her mother's diamond engagement ring. She picked it up, holding it to the light not with sentiment, but with the detached gaze of an appraiser. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought she would pocket it. Instead, she placed it back in the box, a flicker of something, disappointment, on her face. It was too identifiable, too easily missed. She was smarter than that. She was playing the long game. She sat down at the desk, pulled out a pen, and began to write. Liam zoomed in. He could see her hand moving, perfectly forging his mother's shaky, elegant signature. He was watching a crime in real time. The stranger wasn't just a thief. She was a predator, and his mother's home was her hunting ground. He saved the recording, his hand shaking so violently he almost dropped the phone. The proof was undeniable. It was brutal. And it was his weapon now. The weight of the video on his phone felt heavier than anything Liam had ever carried. It was a vile artifact, a recording of the precise moment his life had fractured. For 2 days, he said nothing. He moved through his life like a ghost, his interactions with Chloe a hollow pantomime of their former marriage. He'd look at her, smiling at him over breakfast, and see the cold-faced woman in gloves, forging his mother's name. The dissonance was dizzying. He knew he couldn't just show her the video. A private confrontation would allow her to control the narrative, to beg, to bargain, to unleash her arsenal of emotional manipulation. This couldn't be a negotiation. It had to be a reckoning. He called his mother. "Mom," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'd like to have you and Chloe over for dinner on Friday. Just the 3 of us. I'm going to cook." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Is everything all right, Liam?" she asked, her voice laced with the weary intuition of someone who has been bracing for impact for a very long time. "Everything is going to be all right, Mom," he said, and the words were a vow. Friday arrived, cloaked in a tense, suffocating stillness. Chloe was in her element, arriving with a bottle of expensive wine and a bright, breezy charm that now seemed grotesque to Liam. "This is so lovely, honey," she said, kissing his cheek. "A special dinner just for us." She turned to Eleanor, draping an arm around her shoulder. "Eleanor, you look wonderful. That color is so good on you." Eleanor simply nodded, her face a pale, impassive mask. She had the look of someone who had come to witness an execution, uncertain of whose it would be. The dinner was an excruciating affair. Liam served the roasted chicken he had meticulously prepared, the familiar actions a strange comfort in the surreal atmosphere. Chloe kept up a constant stream of cheerful chatter, filling the silence that Liam and Eleanor left empty. She talked about her design business, about a funny thing that happened at the grocery store, about plans for their summer vacation. With every word, Liam's rage solidified into a cold, hard diamond in his chest. He watched her laugh, this woman who had systematically dismantled his mother's life and his own peace of mind, and he felt nothing but a profound, chilling emptiness. Finally, the plates were cleared. Liam stood up and walked over to the sideboard, retrieving his laptop. When he returned to the table and set it down, Chloe's chatter finally faltered. "What's that for?" she asked, a nervous little laugh in her voice. "Don't tell me you have a work presentation for us." "In a way," Liam said, his voice dangerously calm. He didn't look at her. He looked at his mother, his eyes full of a grief and apology that was years overdue. "Mom," he said. "I am so sorry." He turned the laptop to face Chloe. He didn't say another word. He just pressed play. The video filled the screen. The silent, damning footage of Chloe entering the house. The chilling transformation of her face. The latex gloves. The stolen checks. The forgery. As the video played, every drop of color drained from Chloe's face. Her mask of charming perfection didn't just crack, it disintegrated, leaving behind the raw, terrified face of a common thief caught in the act. The smile froze, then twisted into a grimace of pure horror. Her breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the faint sound of birdsong from the video's audio track. The video ended. Liam closed the laptop. The quiet that followed was the loudest sound Eleanor had ever heard. It was the sound of truth, brutal and undeniable, finally taking its rightful place at their table. For a long moment, nobody moved. Chloe sat frozen, her face a canvas of disbelief and terror. Her eyes darted from the closed laptop to Liam, then to Eleanor, searching for an escape route where there was none. The charm, the wit, the carefully constructed walls of plausible deniability, all had been reduced to ash. She opened her mouth, then closed it, a fish gasping for air. The first one to speak was not Liam, with his righteous fury, but Eleanor. Her voice, when it came, was not loud or accusatory. It was filled with a profound and weary sorrow that was far more devastating than any shout. "Why?" she asked, the single word hanging in the air, heavy with the weight of years of unspoken pain. "It wasn't just the money, was it? Or the jewelry? I would have given you anything you asked for. All you had to do was ask. So, why?" That one question seemed to break Chloe's paralysis. A strange, bitter smile twisted her lips. The fear in her eyes was replaced by a flash of something dark and venomous, resentment. "Why?" she repeated, her voice a raw, ugly rasp. "You want to know why?" She finally looked at Eleanor, truly looked at her, and the deference was gone, replaced by a lifetime of banked envy. "Because you had everything," she hissed, the words tumbling out, poisoned with a bitterness that had been festering for years. "You had the perfect life. The adoring husband who looked at you like you were the only woman in the world. The perfect son who worshipped the ground you walked on. This house, these things, they're not just things. They're proof. Proof of a life I was never good enough to have." This was the shocking moral twist. It was never just about greed. It was about erasure. Chloe wasn't just stealing from Eleanor, she was trying to steal her life, to dismantle her legacy of happiness piece by piece because she couldn't build her own. "I loved you," Eleanor whispered, her heart breaking not for the stolen objects, but for the desecration of that love. "I treated you like my own daughter. And I was never your daughter." Chloe shot back, her voice rising to a shrill cry. "I was just the woman who married your son. I was an addition. An outsider. Always standing in your shadow, in the shadow of your perfect marriage, your perfect family. Every time Liam told a story about you and his father, every time he looked at that stupid watch on your dresser, it was a reminder that I could never measure up. I wasn't just taking your things. I wanted you to feel what I felt. I wanted you to be the one who was small, and confused, and forgotten." The confession was more intimate and violating than the theft itself. It laid bare the rot at the core of their family. Chloe's crime wasn't one of opportunity, it was a crime of envy, a deep, existential jealousy that had driven her to methodically tear down the one person who had offered her unconditional love. Liam, who had remained silent and rigid throughout, finally spoke. His voice was hollow, devoid of all emotion. "Get out," he said. Chloe stared at him, her face crumpling as the reality of her situation finally crashed down upon her. "Liam, please." "I can explain." "No," he said, the word a final, unbreachable wall. "You've explained enough. Get your things. And get out of my life." The fall from grace was complete. It wasn't just a humiliating exposure, it was the severing of every tie that had given her a place in the world. She had stolen checks and jewelry, but what she had truly lost was everything. The aftermath was not a victory. There was no triumphant justice, only the quiet, desolate landscape of a family in ruins. Chloe was gone within the hour, her departure as quiet and swift as her deceptions had been. She signed the divorce papers without a fight, returned what money she hadn't spent, and relinquished any claim to their shared life. The law was never involved. Liam decided against it, not out of mercy for Chloe, but as a final, desperate act to shield his mother from the public humiliation of a trial. The true punishment wasn't legal, it was the absolute and total annihilation of Chloe's life as she knew it. She lost her husband, her home, her reputation, and the family she had so desperately envied and systematically destroyed. She became a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered among the few who knew the real story. But the wreckage remained. Liam was a man haunted by his own blindness. The guilt of not believing his mother was a constant, corrosive presence. He looked at Eleanor and saw not just his mother, but a testament to his own failure as a son. He tried to make amends with lavish gifts, constant visits, and unending apologies, but both knew that the chasm that had opened between them could never be fully closed. He had chosen a stranger over his own blood, and that was a sin that time could not easily forgive. For Eleanor, justice was a cold comfort. She had her home back, her finances were secure, but her sense of safety was shattered. The sanctuary of her house now felt violated, its memories tainted. She would look at a photograph of a smiling family gathering and see only the lie hiding behind Chloe's bright eyes. She had won the battle, but the war had cost her the one thing she had cherished most, the innocent belief in the goodness of her family. Months later, Eleanor sat in her husband's armchair, the evening light filtering through the window. She held an old photo album in her lap, open to a picture from Liam and Chloe's wedding day. She, her late husband, Liam, and Chloe, all smiling for the camera. A perfect family. The narrator's voice emerges, reflective and somber. We learn a terrible lesson from stories like this. The cost of betrayal is never measured in dollars or carats. It's measured in stolen moments. It's counted in the trust that turns to poison, in the love that's revealed as a mask for envy. The most dangerous strangers are not the ones who break down our doors in the middle of the night. They are the ones we invite inside, the ones we give a key to, the ones we embrace and call our own. They dismantle our lives not with a hammer, but with a smile, a kind word, and a patient, practiced lie. The true theft is the theft of memory, the poisoning of the past until nothing, not even a wedding photograph, can be looked upon without a shadow of doubt. Eleanor closed the album, her face a portrait of quiet resilience and infinite sorrow. She had her truth back, but she would forever live with the ghost of the lie. Have you ever felt betrayed by family? Share your story in the comments below.